Hello, everyone, and good evening. Tonight we have Heather Lang-Cassera with us. But before we begin, I want to remind everyone to smash the like button and follow us or subscribe from wherever you're watching. Also, if you have any comments or questions for Heather this evening, you can put them in the comments section from wherever you're watching, and we'll be able to see them in real time and answer them in real time. So let's welcome to Heather Lang-Cassera, whose book was born yesterday, titled Firefall. She's going to read from that book, and she's also going to read from her previous book. It's she writes echo poetry, I think, and she will explain to that what that means. Welcome, Heather, and thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for, running this literary series. It's an awesome service to the community. And, thanks for being
Thank
an
you.
incredible author as well. Like, we're so fortunate to have you, and I love being your pressmate.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to hear you read. So tell us a
Thank
little bit
you.
about each book that you're going to read from.
Awesome. So, if it sounds like a plan, I'll start with the one who just had its book birthday yesterday, Firefall.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very excited about it. So, Firefall is a collection of eco poems, largely in nature poems and things of that sort. And it is my hope that it might whisper to folks about the urgency of climate change and also encourage folks to just sort of contemplate other similar eco-centric versus human-centric matters. So I intend for the book to invite readers to consider seeming dualities. Some of those are fire and flood, repetition and redundancy, vulnerable witness, and autonomous self. And I hope that the poems might leave folks with more questions than answers, as I certainly don't have the answers. And that's one of the things that I love about poetry, is that I think it can really be a great place to contemplate for reader and writer alike. And I hope, though, that the questions or the book might spark questions that are maybe like more deliberate or thoughtful or change inspiring, and help folks come to their own conclusions about how to approach our natural world, which really at the end of the day is our entire world. Like, our entire world is in many ways synonymous with our natural world. And I think that especially in contemporary society, like, that's really easy to forget. So those are kind of the things that, I was thinking about when I was writing this particular book. So yeah, if it's okay, I'll start there and I'll read from Firefall. Awesome. So this collection is a collection of untitled poems. And I do that intentionally because I like the ways in which poetry can work within the context of a book, not to just have those individual poems, but also to create like a larger narrative with some, different topography and tell a story that you might not feel, if you're just reading the poems in and of themselves. So each of these poems is untitled. Or if you would like, you can consider that each of the poems is titled Firefall. Firefall. Waking to an ocean on fire, where morning's first light graces a cheekbone like an aerial perch for every song we have unsung. Follows constellations urgent as blooms of delicate wildflowers. Meadows made of never-ending shadows, temperate belongings, absent coasts. We witness our collective breath as wings pinned to maps by gravity, by longing, by quickened stars here, where affection has been hidden in the voiceless whispers found in the ferocity of coordinates stark and untamed. Delicate enough to be risked, always empty by running, pink and bleating with wilderness. New homes choose the undeniable, the forest, frenetic, the cobalt morning. You touch them apart from me, an unnerving room, unidentifiable. My name watches me. I walk the length of the floorboard rivers, my hands shadow, apprehensive, but ready, silent as a sliver of sharp paper. The possible, the darkness, the huddled dirty at the hem. The woodland smoke scratches at the door like a compass bloomed and broken, a safety pin no longer blanketed by wildflower corsage, a place that is anywhere but here. A flock of birds, tissue thin from where we stand, a life, an object exposed yet unspoiled, mistaken and unchangeable, like someone in gray wool socks, drenched, coming back to you before winter. Every theater has a ghost. You were the one to cut the illusionist himself in half with your follow spot, to light him at low level, to hold the cable with perfect tension in the dark before the shift in zenith, and then coil quickly hand over hand, to walk past mirrors, oh, such sweet tachenda, meant to make it seem as if no one were there, to witness the showman parade around the passerelle, on stoic stallion as stark white as the lies we now tell ourselves. Yet, amongst tigers with names like Mirage, who could remember that horse that appeared only once per show, but whose hooves shattered the lights within that palatial stage each night? You were the one who fixed them. When you returned home after midnight smelling like Montecore or cashmere, your house cat would hiss, demand you cry pecave, and then rub her face against your penumbral black denim, telling you where you belonged. Where did she sense in herself the ingravescent afterthought of those beautiful beasts? Was it magic? Ossified? Too familiar? So you'll notice perhaps that a lot of my work is steeped in Southern Nevada. I live in downtown Las Vegas, but I spend a lot of time not only here making art, poetry, ceramics, all sorts of things, but also exploring the land. And so there's definitely, I'm interested in those juxtapositions between, the very city-like life that we live and then going out in the middle of nowhere, which is very easy in Nevada, and being the only person for miles. Bees ghost line the shadows, moonburst in reverse. Please, tell me the story one more time. Again, we steep ourselves in reflection, burn toast and eat marmalade near midnight. Not wanting to care for the pigeons, such small wanderers, their patterns of negative night sky bodies. Not wanting to love their heart-curved flesh, too large for the dry riverbeds of my hands. Not wanting to justify my unshadowed tenderness for something buoyed and overripe and understanding of her own need, and surrounded by silent songbirds. Not wanting two wings almost identical in symmetry, shadows that smother the ground. Not wanting invisible tongues of perfect pink oleander forever pressed onward, even in this arid sky. A birth cry, a death breathing an intangible sun, a heap of inconsolable hope, available only from yesterdays. These fingers become bandages for everything in my body that might someday be broken. The obscurity of other blunt souls dredges bee pollen as bright sorrow, horizons as weeping everything, murmurs as fragile bundles, anguish illuminated in each of these exquisite gallopings. The ghost light. The nightlight keeps its sloping hum, an invisible sound. A home exhales line, rests in a dark theater. An invisible sound, like empty spoon, like brimming fear, rests in a dark theater, curtains made of pink carnations. Like empty spoon, like brimming fear, the storm came before morning, curtains made of pink carnations, tossing petals in the cold rain. The storms came. Before morning, the wood was riverscape, the bicycle still. Tossing petals in the cold rain, the nightlight keeps its sloping hum. So I write a lot in free verse, but I also tend to lean into more formal poetic forms at times, like pantoums, especially when I'm thinking about the seasons and climate change, occasionally the sonnet. And I just find that I really enjoy thinking about form as it speaks to the content or might mirror or amplify the content um, of the messages. The number 10 is a window of multitudes, ecosystem of decimal, lung collapsed and reopened. If close enough, even a speck of dust would eclipse the moon. A breath pressed as purple mountain petals exhales in all directions. These once broken bones are now stunted coral. A static code as staccato as the sting of unworried sea nettle. Before scales hollow the sunlight, mouths burst into sacrament, vertebrae turn into honeycomb. The low sky of a lost alphabet, your heart sketches its own diagram for every missed opportunity. Love is a fetal memory for what we cannot understand, kept cradled in the curl of each of our empty fingers, every unit of sound. Only this I know for certain. Morning will be the wildfire at the foot of our bed. We cannot be the radial symmetry of the starfish, nor a fruit, nor a fossil. This one is written largely after a walk I took in downtown Las Vegas. The nest, the lint, the fire which could have happened, the oleander opening white hot petals in the Mojave summer of our backyards amidst our failing houses, the faceless triceratops figurine capsized on the sidewalk, reminding us of an article about climate change, about how, just maybe, global warming also brought about the dinosaurs, yet we have neither feather nor scale despite weathered faces from too many days of sun. And this too shall pass, the clouds and their quivering bodies, because even something made of so much water can be considered as such an impulse to compare the momentary cracks of lightning to the fractured pavement on which we walk, our feet skipping like heartbeats in chests deep and scared of thunder. A burst of sound echoing, saying what we never quite could. While the fragments of unfound solitude sift through the corrugation of a new refrigerator box, emptied and abandoned, amidst the soft light wood-like, but not quite, smell of cardboard, waiting carefully just beyond the curb. With all this tender kindling our mouths cannot preserve. So I wrote that poem to be all just one long sentence, because to me it felt more like, the authenticity of going on that kind of walk and pausing, but carrying on. Wanting water. Here is where I return to when I am feeling without you. When object permanence fails me, when the ocean perch within my chest turns into a ruby-throated hummingbird and then back into a fish out of water yet again, all without ever being seen. But in the end, everything is hidden from at least somebody. It's Pisces season. What we let go can be written down and then burned and then, instead of buried, lost within the moon water, which was made by abandoning open-mouthed vessels beneath this late night light. This time, under this terrestrial body, it can only be the small things that we let go. When we were young, you would look up asking to be held. Would our mother empty her vacant pockets, pulling them inside out, as if ebbing like tidal flow, as if each denim basin could be an entire sea, only to say no, to say she had nothing more to offer? What does it mean that I am so much older than you were when you died? Why can I no longer remember the shape of you, sister, when you would swim? And that particular poem or section was the last poem in Firefall. Thank you for listening. And
such powerful poetry, especially that last one. So looking forward to your excerpts on your other book, your previous book.
you got it. Thank you for inviting me to read from both. It's very kind of you. So Gathering Broken Light was written in memory and in honor of the victims and survivors and the folks most affected by 1 October, which was a really horrible, unspeakable tragedy that happened here in Las Vegas, a mass shooting that just devastated our community. And all of my royalties for this book go to the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center. And this is just written, for my community. I'll just read a couple from here. The prickly pear flickers, silent in the late heat, with flame-like petals, snapshots of a moment, supergiant stars as the sky has fallen and settles to the coral red floor of our still, raw earth. Some things are meant to be seen, not touched, never heard, and so we wait, confronting pasts we cannot understand, futures that can only be wrongly predicted. Nopales wave us forward, gestures of kindness when least expected. Juxtaposed against the mountains, torn against deep blue, and those that came before. Even this desert was once an ocean. Beaks of birds emerge from crumpled paper. Concrete nouns shimmering against what we might pretend to see as a winter landscape. A failed anticipation of something new. Through proximity, what else have we forgotten? We wait the shape of this small home, with roof more gentle than steeple, tugging us toward the ground, asking us about the last time that we felt something truly. I walk toward the hills and cannot remember your name. You warned me in the night I would forget the deepest angles, the sleep-swept octaves of your voice. What else have I capsized? I dog ear pages to temper swollen verbs, phrases posing without shadow, moving forward without doubt. Our shared words now lifted, like pollen, skyward, becoming the stars. You deserve to be remembered. How can I keep hope-drenched moments between curled hands? In this moonlight, a pause, a perspective. We become something better and something less. This grief returning again and again. And then there's one more in particular that I'm looking for. There we go. The desert tortoise makes her way, not as if she could move mountains. She is the buttes and saddlebacks, and is too perfect to be a fixed part of this dust-splashed earth. She swishes sand, leaving wing-shaped tracks, and on her back carries a detailed topographic map. The delicate lines, contours of relief, or manifestations of the gaps we fill with silence and other absent declarations. Together we hear the hearty hissing and guttural grunts, warning us to keep our distance. We thought the tortoise was a snake, but we learn even our palms, such unquiet basins, can ache. Thank you for letting me read from both books.
What incredible, powerful poetry. And I think that all of us who have listened tonight got to see a different kind of Las Vegas than what we normally see. One that's quieter and one that's a little bit more profound and even a little bit more colorful in different and more subtle ways. So I can understand that you will get to the book about the massacre, but let's getting back first to your Firefall, which is newly born. Yeah, what inspired? I mean, living in Las Vegas, where there's a lot of light and noise and a lot of light and sound, to seek the quieter essence of life.
Mm-hmm.
Really, like you have to really look for it, you know. So talk about that process.
Absolutely. So, one of the many reasons I love living here, and I've been here about 10 years, is because you can really have both. Like, you can live in this city with millions of people and, go to an incredible coffee shop, um, see all sorts of different types of music, go to the theater. There's so much that you can do here and so many different folks that you can connect with and, learn from and celebrate life with. But then you can drive, just like an hour outside of the city to find, BLM land, and you can just really be all by yourself. Of course, you have to be careful. You have to be smart about it. You have to know it's the desert, right? It can be very dangerous.
What is BLM land?
Oh,
What
so
is that?
Bureau of Land Management. And
Oh,
so
okay. So that's a term I
yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah, and it's something that there's a lot of it out here in the West and not so much of it in, other parts of the United States. It's a great question. And it's something honestly that like I wasn't a huge outdoor adventurer before I moved here. I lived in Seattle for a while. I lived in Wisconsin for a long time. I've lived a few different places, but they were all places where I felt like, you could go kind of just outside and look at the trees and just feel I felt maybe more immediately one with nature. And when I first moved here, I think that I know I really missed the green and I really missed the water. And I
Hmm.
had to kind of start paying more attention to see, the natural world and to really appreciate it. And yeah, like there's so many places where you can go, and again, you have to be safe, you have to bring water. You shouldn't go when it's 110 out like it is right now or whatever. However warm it is, it's very warm right now. But you can just go and sit in the silence in different, canyons and different desert landscapes, and there's mountains within an hour and then also again a couple hours of here, and you can climb the elevation and just witness the changes in the flora and fauna as you climb the mountain. And yeah, for me there's just something really profound about being able to be surrounded by
Hmm.
people and then suddenly not, and it makes me appreciate both so much more.
Your metaphors reflect that. Some of the metaphors are really quite lovely. And I was thinking to myself, I got to remember to ask her about that. But the your talk about your metaphors, because your metaphors actually have nature in them, but some of them have incorporated humanity in it as well. There are, so even though it's about nature, they're people. You talk about you talk about our bed, the fire beneath our bed. Some of those are really incredible. So talk about a little bit about those metaphors, because metaphors are hard to achieve, especially original ones.
I feel this. I feel this when we think about like, the vehicle and the tenor of a metaphor and how like they have to work together and they have to have some sort of like, cohesion, and yet they have to be something new that we haven't heard a million times before
Mhm.
so that they can really like actually access our limbic system and make us feel something physiologically in our body. Like it's really tricky. Metaphors are really hard. Um, but I
You
think for
nailed it
me,
in these poems. You nailed it.
thank you. That means so much. That means so much to hear. Because it's something I've worked really hard on, honestly. And it has become something that for me is one of the sparks for a poem. Like if I'm feeling a little bit of like writer's block, or I'm not sure, I'm just not sure what to do or what to write, like I have to be creative in some way, or I don't even feel good. I don't feel like myself, right? So like I have to be creating in some way or another. And I find that metaphors can be an amazing way to like just be a great jumping point for a poem. So, I might start with something really, really silly and just be like, you know, the rooftop is like, the broken book, or the broken spine of a book or whatever, and like just play with that until it like has some sort of like sonic eloquence to it. I might try to work in
Mhm.
some alliteration, and then I also contemplate like the different connotations of all of both sides of the metaphor and how they might come together. So it's almost like a puzzle for me. And I do tend to really like things that skirt along the edges of surrealism, because I think that that is a way to really be thought provoking while avoiding the cliche and also letting folks kind of come to their own conclusions. So I'm someone who really doesn't like being told what to do. And sometimes it's a problem. And I really don't like being told what to do. And I really don't like being told what to think. Like, I'd rather be offered the information and come to my own conclusion. And that includes when I'm reading a book, including of poems. And so, like, I want a poet to take me to a place and to show me a place, whether it's a physical place or like a place that in their mind that they're contemplating, and give me different tools and different views and different experiences to kind of come to my own conclusions. And I find that metaphors, especially if I lean into the strangeness, can be a way to hopefully, I mean, I know it helps me explore my thoughts and the world in a new way, and hopefully at least some of my readers as well.
Well, that's pretty an apt metaphor in itself for liking to be living in Las Vegas, which is a
I
city of
suppose
independent bakers. So you
it's a
just
good
brought
point.
that um, you brought that essence to your poetry. So talk about the poem in which the sis. I got the impression it was talking about a sister who perished, a younger
Mm.
sister who perished. So talk a little bit about that poem. If it was, what is the inspiration for that poem?
Absolutely. So I wish I could remember where that poem started, like what the image or the moment was that started that particular poem. And I don't remember for sure, but there's a few different things that come together. I was spending some time with one of my friends who doesn't love being outside as much as I do, but she's very interested in and it's okay. Like I really love being like outside. I understand like it's probably a little extreme. Um but so I think we went to Zion. We went to somewhere in Utah, and we were glamping, which is not normally my thing. Normally I'm like I car camp, right? Like I just want to be outside. But it was so much fun, and she was telling me all about these different points of astrology, which like I'm not super familiar with, and talking about moon water and all these different things that kind of gave me a different entryway into everything, right? Existence, the natural world, all of that. Because again, like it's not my knowledge area, right? And so we were talking about that. And then I also unfortunately did lose a sister. She had a sudden cardiac death, and she was amazing. She was so awesome. And I think about her, of course, all of the time. And that informs a lot of my writing. Um, and I also think a lot, though, about metaphors of like sisterhood and mother nature. And I try to contemplate those in ways that aren't, I hope, too heavy handed, right? Like to me, the idea of mother nature, because it's such a common phrase, I don't know that hearing those words really evokes anything super specific for me. Like, I almost see like a cartoon planet Earth or something, right? And so I think that I oftentimes look for language that can kind of reintroduce the Earth or reintroduce our relationship with the Earth and with one another and with life and with death in like new ways, so that I
Mhm.
have new entry points that are a little less cliche or a little less redundant, or, you know, like new ways to think about grief. And because I'm talking about avoiding cliches, but I really do believe that like grief is the highest form of love. Like grieving
Mhm.
someone is like, that is an act of love, right? Um, so yeah, I kind of look for all of those connections. And I think, so I do talk a lot about humans, even though I'm like, this is, you know, ecocentric. We're thinking about the natural world, but really like we are not disconnected, right? Like we are part of the natural world. Everything that we do comes from the natural world. And like I think it's just helpful, fruitful, maybe important, if I can be so bold, to try to like make those connections, you know, like relationship to, you know, sisterhood and to, you know, motherhood, and think about what that means in terms of like the planet that we live on, and what we give and what we take, and how we exist and how we respect one another.
Yeah, that comes pretty clear actually, because it's people, but very subtly. You know, the people don't take over the poem. It's
Awesome.
definitely very nicely dovetailed as part of what's going on. And I almost feel that perhaps your next eco poems may be about the desert itself and teeming with life, which a lot of people don't realize. And
Hmm.
I love the fact that you put the prickly pear in there, which is a desert flower turned fruit. And one of my
Hmm.
favorites, I actually have a prickly pear pin that that broke. I love prickly pears.
They're so
Called
beautiful.
Fig of India in Italy, Fica de India.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, talking about grief being the highest form of love, that's a good segue into your first book about the massacre and the grief and the shock that
Mhm.
happened. They say writers express themselves through words. So I'm guessing that the highest form of love for your fellow um, Las Vegans after that massacre was to write that book. So do you want to talk about that book and how it came to be, and whether, you know, some things we labor over, poetry and stories we labor over, and some things are just born. So was that book kind of one of those that was just born, or did you labor over it?
It's a really great question. So I I was not at the concert site where the, you know, the terrible events happened. I did have friends there. I had students there. You know, friends and family who work on the strip that were right near there. But part of me, because I wasn't at the concert itself, I felt very much, and I still think about this today, like who am I to write about this thing that happened, right? And so I did a lot of writing to process and, you know, try to contemplate and make sense of, which is impossible, of the terrible things that happened. And so I wrote a lot of poems that I fully intended no one to ever see. And then I started sharing them with some of my friends and some of my community members. So I was the Clark County Poet Laureate, and folks oftentimes wanted to know kind of what you think about things that happen in the community, or how you're processing, you know, these different events and tragedies and circumstances. And so I started sharing in very small groups some of the poems, and folks would tell me how deeply moved they were. And folks started to be like, hey, Heather, you know, I really think that you should share these. Like, I understand. And like, they appreciated that I was trying to be respectful of not overstepping, or not, you know, making something mine that wasn't mine, and making room for the voices of folks who were more, even more directly connected to what happened, right? But I just got a lot of encouragement from folks who were like, I think that these poems, and I think that this book could really be helpful to a lot of people. And so I thought a lot about it, and I also studied a lot of poets who had written about different tragedies, and kind of like, you know, documented different events that happened. So like Leanne Rorapaw's one, she writes about she has a book, Tsunami versus the Fukushima 50, and you know, she talks about this like nuclear reactor tragedy, and she writes a lot about that. And I read interviews and different things about how she approached that with respect and the gravity that it deserved, and the thoughtfulness, and just, being really mindful. And one of my friends was eventually just kind of encouraged me enough that I started sharing it more and more. And part of it for me too is that I think I mentioned this, but like all of the royalties go to an organization, a
Mhm.
nonprofit who helps folks who have, survived those terrible circumstances. And so it felt like a way that I could give back to the community. But yeah, so originally, like, I actually didn't plan to show these poems to anyone. It was very much like a way of me processing these difficult things. But yeah, it's really an example, I think, too, of how, art and community are so interconnected, and how we can help each other, and how art helps us through the most difficult things that we can, imagine or could never imagine. So yeah, no, it was a very difficult book to write, and then it was a very difficult book to revise and edit and share. And I share different sections of it based on who I'm reading to too. I try to be mindful of that, because there's some parts of the book that are very, very difficult to read, and there's some parts that are more metaphorical or more steeped in like the potential healing aspects of nature. But yeah, no, it was a difficult book. Sorry, that's the really long answer to an excellent
Yeah, that's
question.
okay. No, and I would argue that you are part being a Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, even though it says it's a big city, it really is not. It's a really small city. It's just the strip that brings a lot of people, and the
Hmm.
gambling that brings a lot of people. But the people who are there all year long, I would imagine, kind of sort of, you see the same faces at the supermarket and stuff. So it impacts everyone. So I would say that
Hmm.
you, just being part of the community, were impacted. And also, more than that, it resonates on a higher level, on a more universal level, because unfortunately, such horrible events are not just limited to Las Vegas, they're happening all over the United States,
Hmm.
especially in schools. School shootings, mall shootings,
Hmm.
it happens everywhere. So it's kind of like an unfortunate part of our culture
Hmm.
that a lot of people could resonate with those poems, because a lot of people have suffered through the impacts of that, of such an unthinkable thing. So
Absolutely. And
that's
that
why
was
I think the book's popular.
and I got a lot of exactly the same kind of folks shared identically that, like, this is an important thing for us to talk about. I remember I went and I read before this book came out. I read a couple of the poems to some folks. I was visiting the Bay Area, and we were talking, and they were asking some questions. And these were folks who seemed very aware of the world and who were absolutely lovely. And some of them didn't know that this had happened. And it was
Mm.
an unimaginable loss of life. And so it was one of those things where I was like, wow, like, we do need to keep talking about these things, and we do need to keep honoring the folks who are most affected, and we do need to, like, try to work towards some sort of solution to this problem that we experience. So yeah, like, what you're saying is sort of like the kind of feedback and the conversations I kept having.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about your writing process. Do you write every day? Do you keep journals? Uh, Talk a little bit about your writing process. Do you walk around taking notes of things that you see in trees, like maybe finding a feather or something eco that you write down? Like, talk about your writing process.
So I get the wiggles, like, I'm not good at sitting still. And it's one of the things that makes writing a little bit challenging sometimes for me, because so for example, I have a wonderful job right now. I'm an instructional designer for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Um, and I help like other professors and instructors build classes, and I love it. Like, I'm so fortunate to do the work that I do. And before that, I was full-time teaching faculty for a university I still teach creative writing with, Nevada State University. For both of those jobs, though, I find that I have to spend an incredible amount of time sitting at a computer, right? And so that can be a challenge for me, because after I spend, 8 hours sitting at a computer, or seven with breaks or whatever, however I can, make it work, it can be very difficult for me to want to sit down and spend more time at a computer, no matter how excited I am about a project. And so a lot of what I do is I will like go on a hike and I will see something and it'll spark a metaphor. And then I will handwrite it out or I will talk to my phone. Um, or, I kind of write in bursts as well, where like I will actually take some time off to do some writing. Or I have a typewriter that sometimes helps me. Like I wrote part of this book on a train on a typewriter, which I'm sure people were probably like, this is really weird. But you know what? Like, if it works, I don't know what to tell you. I will also do I do ceramics a lot these days. And I find that they really help each other because if I can't
Mhm.
work something out in writing, maybe it's meant to be a sculpture. And if it's not meant to be a sculpture, maybe it's meant to be a poem, or sometimes those dovetail together into something really lovely. One of the things I should mention is that for both of these books, I received support from the Nevada Arts Council. I received project grants. And so I was able to take on less freelance work because it means, more time sitting in the chair and dedicate more time to writing. And so that's something like I'm so deeply grateful for the Nevada Arts Council. And also, when I submit and receive grants, it gives me an external deadline. It's not always super
Mhm.
easy for me to prioritize myself and my own art and my own writing, but like for example, I just finished writing my first novel called Flight, and it's a science fiction manuscript, and I received a grant from the Nevada Arts Council. And what I promised them is that I would finish the manuscript and I had to deliver it, right? So that meant I had to write it, I had to finish it in 6 months. That was that. Like I had made that commitment. And so there were
That's
days where
impressive for a novel. Impressive.
thank you.
Six
It
months.
was it was way too ambitious, but I did do the thing. But yeah, sometimes I find like those external, like, motivating factors, or like writing groups, right? Like having some friends or peers, colleagues who are excited about your work too. But yeah, like it's interesting because I absolutely love writing, but sometimes the actual physical act of sitting still can be difficult for me. So
I get it. So do you teach writing at all, or you said you so talk about that. Like, what do you tell your students in terms of what kind of time commitment you give to your own work while you're teaching others?
that's a great question. So, yeah, I teach creative writing with Nevada State University. I'm also currently teaching composition with Arizona College of Nursing. Like, I love teaching. I just love teaching. And one of the things I have found is that not there's like no one approach fits everybody, right? And so I know
Mhm.
lots of folks are really committed to writing every day, journaling every day. Some folks write in bursts. Some folks will write a chapter or a poem and then revise it, and then write another chapter or poem and revise it. Some folks need to, like, when they catch that excitement about writing, just write, and revise later. And so my biggest advice for my students tends to be like, you need to be somehow actively involved in the writing process, but it's okay to take some time to figure out what that is. So for me, like if I'm not hiking or experiencing nature, or doing lately, it's like doing ceramics has been really important for my writing. Like there, if I'm not doing those things, my writing is not good. Like, I don't feel excited about it, and that shows on the paper. But so typically, honestly, we just walk through a lot of different approaches. For some people, it's hitting go on the timer and making yourself write for 10 minutes and writing something like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, I'm so bored, writing that over and over and over again. And then eventually you do somehow, get yourself out of that, because you can only say I'm so bored on a piece of paper so many times. Sometimes, like, I think the writing process is taking a walk with a friend where you say, hey friend, I really want to write this book, but I'm a little bit stuck. Can you hold me accountable to like 15 minutes of this walk? We're going to talk about my book, we're going to talk about plot points, or we're going to talk about metaphors. And like, having someone hold you accountable and just having those conversations, like sometimes just talking to someone else can spark something. So I have kind of a list of things that I'm like, go and try all of these and figure out what works well for you. And also remember that, like, if something works well for you for now, for next week, for next year, amazing. And it might change.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's really, and then also just to be like, you have to be excited or curious or something. Like there has to be some sort of spark. lots of times I know people refer to it as like play, that creating art is play. I think that that is really important. Sometimes when it's difficult topics, it might not feel like play, but maybe it feels more like curiosity or exploration. But I think that if you're not looking, if you're not open minded, and you're not looking to explore in some ways, I think it's a lot harder to create art that allows your audience member to discover something new.
So talk about being a poet laureate. How did that happen? And how long had you held the position of poet laureate?
So I was poet laureate, Clark County poet laureate, in Southern Nevada for 2 years, from 2019 to 2021. And from my conversations with other laureates, I've learned it's very different depending on where you are. Everyone has a different process. But in mine, so for the years that I did it, there was a an application process. You had to also be nominated. You had to submit your work. You had to submit, I think, your artist CV, if I recall correctly. You had to go through an interview process, and it was a lot about your work, but it was also a lot about how you were serving your community. So
Mm.
for the Clark County Poet Laureate position, it's a lot about how you give back. Are you serving as an editor on a literary magazine, or are you hosting open mics, or like just whatever that means? It could look like so many things, giving back to your literary community and the greater community. But yeah, the scope was really to help celebrate poetry as an art form and also a medium for conversation. And so I did a lot of programming with folks who were brand new to poetry. And that is some of my favorite, like folks who come in and they're like, I could never write a poem. And I'm like, you can. And just helping them like find those little sparks, whether it's giving them the option to follow a very specific prompt, or something that's a little bit more flexible. And when folks come sit down and they write a poem and they leave your session and they didn't think that they could do it and they totally did the thing, like that's something that is really really exciting, because I think having some sort of creative avenue is just so good for us in so many ways. And to just watch the ways in which people have friendships bloom, and then just it can be really, I mean, as like art can be really really life changing. um it was a really interesting time to be poet laureate, because of course 2019 to 2021 was during the pandemic, and so we
Mm.
had to shift a lot of gears. We had to try to do some online programming and then do some outdoor programming. um Probably one of my favorite things was we did a collaborative poem where like one community member would write a stanza, and then that would go to another community member, and that would go to another community member. And Nevada Humanities published that poem on their website, and that was really fun because we had, I sure remember the number, but it was over 50 folks who contributed. And so that was a really fruitful, exciting way to stay in conversation, to keep doing art while we were, sheltering in place. And then there was also an opportunity to collaborate again with Nevada Humanities to put poetry on those trucks, those advertising trucks, those big light up trucks that usually have ads on the side. So we did
Mhm.
poems on the sides of those by local poets again. And that was really cool because we could all go outside and watch the truck along the route and still be outside and still be safe, and do that. So, yeah. And then we did some poetry at the park, like the dog park. And yeah, we really had to get creative because a lot of the programming we were planning on doing, we couldn't do. But it was such an honor to be able to serve our community during like such a difficult time.
Well, it sounds really important because one of the side effects of having to quarantine is the isolation that many people felt. So it
Absolutely.
seems like you kind of art saved your life, and that poetry saved your life, and that people who not, may have suffered through social isolation found a way to come together. And even if even if it's because they were accountable to others for writing a stanza of a poem, so
Yeah.
they weren't really socially isolated as much.
Yeah, I'm so deeply fortunate. We have such an incredible poetry and literary and like greater arts community, and the way that folks work together. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, your poetry is lovely, and I certainly enjoyed it, and definitely am inspired by all your eco work.
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering if your next book will be a poetry about the desert life. I know that Nevada has scorpions and all kinds of things in the deserts that people, especially us city people, might view as, oh my goodness. um, so I hope that you continue working, and I'm looking forward to your next book. It's
Thank you.
9:23. We end at 9:30. But before we end, I'm going to ask you the question that I always ask every guest on the stream reading, and that is, a lot of aspiring writers watch our streamed readings. So, what advice do you have for an aspiring writer who's not maybe published, maybe is a little unsure about their work or about their effort? So, what would you tell an aspiring writer?
I would say to be curious, follow your curiosity, and write what brings you joy or sets your heart on fire. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but you have to be excited about it or passionate about it or intrigued about it. I really believe that in order for your audience to experience that same thing. So it's really important to listen to fellow writers and to study the work of folks that you admire and to take criticism. That's so important, to have good editors, to have good writing, peers who are willing to look at your work and give you feedback. But at the same time, like, you really do have to be true to yourself and to write what excites you, because that's kind of the whole point, right? Like, if you're not thrilled, intrigued, excited, then your audience isn't going to be either. So don't try to be someone else, try to be you, right? Like, try to find your own unique voice and lean into that, and always ask yourself how you can be better at being you. I think that's the most important part.
What wise words. So, aspiring writers, listen up. It doesn't get any better than that. So, I want to let everyone know that our next stream reading is going to be taking place July 9th, 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Pacific Time, and you can figure out the time zones in between. Thank you for joining us. And Heather's books are available on Unsolicited Press's website, and where all good books are sold: Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, Amazon, wherever books are sold. But definitely, you want to visit the Unsolicited Press website. Also, this is the year of the woman. A lot of the books being published in 2025 by Unsolicited Press are all women writers, and you can actually sign up for a series to get a book a month. They all have red covers. You want to hold up your newest book with its red cover? They all have red covers, so look for all the red covers on Unsolicited Press's website, which is www.unsolicitedpress.com. So don't forget, join us July 9th. Thank you for joining us out there. We see you. And have a good evening and be inspired. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.